Very positive earnings report, a beat, good forecast. You seem to be bucking the trend because we've heard a lot of bad news from other tech companies. How so?
I don't know what I don't know, Emily. Maybe I don't know something. But we're seeing noise. We're not seeing enough signal out there telling us that uh, there is impending doom. Look, we see inflation. We see macroeconomic trends. We saw a version of this 2 years ago with the pandemic. People thought that the floor was going to fall away from under us. Oil went to $0. Revenues vanished for companies, and we seem to have powered through. So I don't think this one is as bad as that when it was 2 years ago.
Do you expect demand to keep up, though? Or could companies tighten their belts over the next few quarters? And could that impact how much software and cybersecurity services they want to buy?
It was interesting. I've been talking to investors all day and a whole bunch of market commentators about our stock and what we see in the market. And the pandemic set about a series of transformations in technology because companies saw that they were wanting in many areas. Their e-commerce infrastructure was not up to snuff, which they had to upgrade because they're trying to sell everything on the web. Their customer interaction mechanisms were not in place because every customer wanted to interact with them digitally because they didn't want to touch people or see people anymore. So a lot of technology transformation projects started in the midst of the pandemic, even a whole bunch of the cloud transformation, and hybrid work. So if you add all that up, we unleashed a series of technology transformations and couple that with the tremendous amount of cyber activity we've seen and the awareness of that. So we're seeing a tailwind for security, which is, I think, more secular and might get dented on the margin, but I think it's still one of the safest and strongest sectors to be in.
Overall, how would you describe the threat landscape right now? Obviously, there's this ongoing war on Ukraine, but the potential, huge cyber apocalypse that, some were warning about with that hasn't necessarily materialized. There's ongoing tension with China. Of course, how do you see these global factors impacting the threats?
Well, look, I think if you step back and look at it, every one of our companies has become digital. And every time you have digitally enabled businesses, you open the door for people to be able to enter from wherever they want. On top of that, we made everybody work from home. So suddenly your attack surface is what we call it, suddenly expanded. Every employee's home is a potential attack vector. Everybody's laptop is every interaction that you have with your customers digitally is a potential way of you getting hacked. And we've seen that. We've seen that in ransomware. We've seen that in business email compromise. 70% of the incidents last year were driven from business email compromise or ransomware. Ransomware spam, sums have gone to $1 million per ransomware event. Every 4 hours, there's a ransomware leak on some website somewhere. So clearly, this is not just a nation-state threat. It also is an economic opportunity for small hackers or hacker groups to build consortia to start making these economic demands on a bunch of people from a ransomware perspective. So you're seeing the threat landscape get more sort of adverse. At the same time, nation states are looking at preparedness because of the Ukraine situation. Say, am I ready to withstand an attack? We haven't seen a cybersecurity apocalypse because we've actually had real lives lost and devastation caused in Ukraine. However, do not underestimate the amount of cyber activities that's gone down in terms of trying to bring the Ukrainian websites down, and white hacktivists going after Russian sites because they don't like what Russia is doing. So you are seeing a tremendous amount of cyber activity we haven't seen before.
There's a new whistleblower in social media, and I'm just dying to get your thoughts on this. This former employee of Twitter, former head of security there, claiming negligent security policies, egregious deficiencies in how they're handling personal data, that they don't know how many bots there even are. There's been some pushback on this. This sounds like something that could be happening within a lot of companies. What's your take on this?
I don't know the particulars of the situation at Twitter. I read about it probably just as recently as you did. I don't know what's happening there. I will say that one of the things we've been canvassing for and hoping for is more scrutiny and more awareness at boards about the threats of cybersecurity. I think cybersecurity is the biggest business continuity risk in the 21st century, and I don't think boards are well prepared to understand the magnitude, understand the impact that can be had, and really to be able to assess whether their individual company is up to snuff in those capabilities. So I think it's a need of the hour. I think the SEC is looking at various mechanisms to be able to create sort of regulation around how people have to disclose cyber activity and cyber readiness, just the way we do in audit committees and finance, et cetera.
Well, there's also this number that we've been hearing over and over again, 600,000 open cyber jobs. I mean, you mentioned it's the responsibility of boards, but is it the government who should be stepping in here to help fill these jobs? Is it
Actually,
companies?
I heard 3.5 million, Emily. So I'm glad if it's 600,000. Look, I
It's a
think this is
lot.
it's a lot. Yes, there's a lot of jobs, and we're almost at full employment. So yes, we need to make sure that keep ample trained people. I think this is a dual-edged problem. This is not a singular problem of finding 600,000 cybersecurity enthusiasts or professionals. I think the fundamental problem is we have not applied ample automation in security, which requires a bunch of clean data, requires a bunch of integration, a bunch for platformization for cybersecurity, which is what we're trying to do and a whole bunch of others are. I think the only way we solve the cybersecurity problem is if we can build AI that actually stops these attacks whilst they're happening. Today's model is not going to work. Today's model is something happens, we collect all the data in large data lakes, and then we have people go hack them look at them to see what actually happened and manually try to find the problem. I think those days are over. Requires a lot more automation. We think we can solve a majority of that 600,000 or 3.5 million people problem by doing that. Yeah, we also need more cybersecurity trained professionals.
Now, so curious for your thoughts on this last one here. You, of course, were Masayoshi Son's number 2 long before he launched the Vision Fund. Now we know he's lost tens of billions of dollars on some of these tech investments. What do you make of this, and what do you think the legacy of Masa and SoftBank will be in spite of this?
Oh, look, Masa is a resilient individual. He's been through this before. He went from boom to bust to the last internet bust, and he sort of reinvented himself. And the one thing I loved about him is that he has immense appetite for risk. And his appetite for risk and his ability to forget his failures is what all of Silicon Valley teaches us. So hopefully he can recover from that and go build it back himself. And I think last time he was down to $1 billion. I think he's a lot more this time than last time. So I have faith in his ability to resurrect himself. But yes, I do think he got a bunch of companies at the wrong end.